Okay, welcome everyone to the deep dive. This is where we take, your sources, your notes, all that research, and we really try to plunge in and pull out those essential nuggets of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we are diving deep into a really unique piece of television, the series Deadwood.
Ah, yes, Deadwood.
We've got a fantastic source here. It's a really detailed review that treats the show, well, not just as entertainment, but almost like a complex text. It really dissects the themes, the symbols, the whole structure underneath.
Right. And our goal today is really to unpack what this analysis tells us about Deadwood. What makes it tick, what makes it stand out so much.
Yeah.
Why does it still resonate with people all these years later? We want to get right to the core of its themes, its characters, its relevance, all through the lens of this review.
Absolutely. And this review makes it clear, right from the start, this is not your average Western. No way.
Yeah.
It's digging into something, much deeper, wrestling with these huge questions about how civilization itself gets kind of brutally forged from chaos.
Okay, so before we dive too deep, maybe let's set the scene a bit. For anyone who needs a quick refresher, what exactly is Deadwood?
Good idea. So it was created by the legendary David Milch, ran for 3 seasons on HBO, 2004 to 2006.
And then we got the movie.
And then thankfully, we got that concluding film in 2019, which, brought some closure.
And the setting is absolutely crucial here. We're talking 1870s, a totally lawless frontier settlement in South Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
And the show basically chronicles the actual, very messy, very real growth of this town from pure anarchy into something that starts to look like a community.
Right. Structure emerges.
Yeah.
And the people bringing this world to life. Wow. What a cast.
Oh, amazing.
People like Timothy Oliphant, Ian McShane, Molly Parker, Brad Dourif, Robin Weiger. I mean, actors who just inhabit the grit and the complexity of it all.
Absolutely. And the review points out this show isn't just one thing. It's a real mix. It's got Western elements, sure, but it's also serious historical drama. And it even pushes into psychological crime territory sometimes. It really defies a simple label.
And that actually leads perfectly into what this analysis calls the show's high concept. It describes Deadwood as a Shakespearean Western.
That's such a great phrase, Shakespearean Western.
Isn't it?
And you can see why, right? Because the main conflict isn't just, cowboys in white hats versus black hats.
Yeah.
It's about the fundamental process of order, sort of clawing its way out of total lawlessness.
Yeah.
And the analysis really stresses how messy and brutal and compromised that whole process is. It's built on blood, corruption, difficult choices.
So there are shootouts, there's frontier action, but the real focus, at least according to this review, it's on things like morality, power dynamics, how a community actually forms, and the raw, often pretty unflattering truth about human nature when you strip away the rules.
Exactly. It's less about the quick draw and more about the deeply flawed soul, you could say.
That really takes us right into the core themes that this review spends a lot of time on. First up is this whole idea of the birth of civilization, right? Out of pure anarchy.
Yeah, it really feels like you're watching an origin myth unfold. I mean, how do you even begin to build a society when there's literally no law,
right?
No government?
Right. How is power first grabbed and then, held onto? And how does something like justice even get defined? The review suggests it's not about ideals. It's about who's strong enough, or maybe clever enough, to impose their will.
And tied right into that is this fascinating look at language and law, David Milch's dialogue. It's legendary.
It is.
It's, ornate, poetic sometimes, but also incredibly shockingly profane.
Yeah.
Often in the same breath.
Yep.
And this analysis points out how language isn't just for talking. It's a weapon in Deadwood. Every negotiation, every threat, every bit of manipulation hinges on the power of words.
And the review notes that law itself kind of becomes less about fixed rules and more like a performance.
A performance, yeah.
It's not about upholding some universal truth. It's about who can best use language and leverage and sheer force of will to convince everyone else to follow their version of order, however shaky it might be.
Which brings us to maybe the toughest question this analysis suggests the show asks. Can civilization actually be built without compromising your morals?
Yeah.
Without getting your hands dirty?
Yeah. The show really doesn't shy away from the muck, does it? Progress in Deadwood isn't clean. It's not neat.
Not at all.
It's built on violence, on bribery, coercion, and often this kind of collective, uncomfortable silence about the really dark things that have to happen for the town to move forward.
Mm-hmm. The review basically argues that corruption isn't just present, it's like foundational. It's baked into the system from the start.
But then, remarkably, you also see these glimmers of, well, redemption, or at least characters going through some kind of moral evolution.
Yeah, totally. People like Swearengen, Bullock, Trixie, they're not static figures.
Yeah.
They struggle, they definitely backslide. But you see this slow, often painful shift away from pure survival mode towards something maybe resembling civility.
It almost feels like they mirror the town itself, you know, constantly pulled between those extremes, being, what did the review call it? Half saint, half sinner.
That captures it perfectly. Half saint, half sinner. And underneath all of that, there's this constant theme of death, impermanence.
Oh, yeah. Nothing feels safe.
Nothing feels settled. Any gain seems temporary because the town exists in this state of perpetual precarious flux. It's always threatened by disease, by betrayal, by these big outside corporate forces starting to creep in. Stability is just fragile.
And speaking of things that are constantly visible, this analysis does a really great job pointing out the symbolism, the allegory woven through the whole series.
It's incredibly rich, yeah. If you start looking for it, it's everywhere.
Like the Gem Saloon.
Yeah.
Swearengen's place.
Yep.
That's way more than just a bar and brothel.
Oh, absolutely. The review calls it the town's theater of power.
It feels spot on. It's the stage, right, where the big deals happen, where loyalties get tested, where lives are made and ruined. It's the nerve center where Swearengen tries to pull the strings on this whole chaotic mess.
And visually, think about the blood and the mud. They're constantly there.
Everywhere.
And they're not just background details. They symbolize the sheer brutality of just existing in that place and the literal filth that order has to somehow emerge from. You can't escape it.
And what about the mirrors and windows? The analysis mentions those too.
Yeah, suggesting they reflect the characters' often split identities.
Okay, like how?
Well, you see Swearengen's ruthless public face, but then maybe catch a glimpse of vulnerability in private.
Well.
Or Bullock's rigid lawman thing. But the reflection shows that rage simmering just underneath.
Right. Okay.
And then the Deadwood camp itself. The whole town becomes this powerful symbol. The review frames it as an allegory for America's own expansion, built on, difficult truths, indigenous dispossession, capitalist ambition, and moral ambiguity.
Wow. Yeah, that connection really hits home when you think about the bigger allegorical picture. The town isn't just like America's story, it is a miniature version of it. A critique, even, of capitalist imperialism, showing how chasing order and profit can justify incredible exploitation.
And things like the telegraph arriving, the railroad coming. They're not just plot points. No. They're metaphors for inevitable change, right? For the encroachment of industrial civilization. It's a kind of progress. Sure, it brings power and structure, but it also threatens to just wipe away the chaotic, brutal foundations laid by the people who got there first.
And one of the most visceral symbols the review brings up, Mr. Wu's pigs.
The pigs.
Yeah.
Described as a grotesque symbol of consequence disposal.
That's putting it mildly. They literally eat the bodies of people Swearengen gets rid of.
Yeah.
It's horrifying. But it literalizes how the town, maybe society in general, just buries its crimes, disposes of the inconvenient truths in the most brutal way imaginable.
It's a powerful, disturbing image.
Definitely. So, moving from those symbols to the actual people living in this world, the analysis talks about the characters as archetypes, almost embodying the town's struggles.
Right. Take Al Swearengen. The review labeled him the philosopher king of crime.
That's brilliant, because he's totally Machiavellian. He uses terrible cruelty, but often it seems like it's to create this twisted kind of stability. For his business, yeah, but it kind of spills over to the town. But you also get these hints that he's genuinely burdened by it all, by the leadership, by maybe unspoken regrets. He's never just a straightforward villain.
Not at all. And then you have Seth Bullock described as the righteous avenger.
Yeah, he's just constantly at war with himself, isn't he? Torn between this deep sense of honor, his duty as a lawman, and this explosive rage he can barely control.
Right. He embodies that tension between formal law and the brutal reality of frontier justice.
Yeah.
Trying to reconcile those two things is his whole struggle.
And Trixie, the review calls her the survivor seeking dignity.
Her journey is incredible. Starts as a prostitute in a world basically designed to chew her up and spit her out.
Yeah.
But she has this fierce desire for respect, for love, for some kind of control over her own life. She really represents that fight for female agency and class struggle in such a harsh, male-dominated place.
And then there's Doc Cochran, the ethical witness.
He really is the conscience of the town, isn't he?
I think so. Through just his sheer exhaustion, his compassion, his commitment to healing people in this absolute filth, he's like the one voice of maybe uncompromised morality when almost everyone else is defined by their compromises.
Well put. Okay, so if all this talk about themes and characters makes you want to jump back into the series or watch it for the first time.
Which you absolutely should.
Definitely. This review highlights a few specific episodes that really showcase these ideas, or character arcs, or just that unique Deadwood style.
Okay, like which ones?
Well, a really key early one is Season 1, Episode 4, Here Was a Man. That's the death of Wild Bill Hickok.
Oh, right. Huge moment.
Huge. The review calls it a major turning point. It changes everything, leaves this kind of haunting, mournful feeling over the camp.
Then the Season 1 finale, Episode 12, Sold Under Sin. That's essential viewing.
Why is that?
Well, a lot of the tensions just explode. You see Swearengen's calculating cruelty taken to an extreme, and Bullock makes this really fateful decision that kind of locks him onto a certain path.
Gotcha. And for a different side of L. Swearengen, Season 2, Episode 8, Childish Things, that's the one where he has kidney stones.
Oh, God. Yeah, painful to watch.
Right. But the review points out it's somehow both darkly comedic and deeply humanizing. You see this vulnerability you don't often get.
Then there's Season 2, Episode 12, Boy the Earth Talks To, highlighted as being really spiritual, almost existential.
Mm-hmm. It brings in some native mysticism, mixes it with all the political backstabbing, and has some incredibly deep, soul-searching dialogue.
And jumping to Season 3, Episode 11, The Catbird Seat, described as a masterclass in manipulation and restraint.
Sounds tense.
It is. It's Swearengen, Hearst, the other town leaders basically navigating this silent war of strategy and power plays. Really subtle, really intense.
And then, of course, we have to mention the 2019 film Deadwood, the movie.
Dakota.
Exactly. The review sees it as a final elegy. Catches up with everyone a decade later. It's really focused on them facing unfinished business, dealing with mortality, legacy, and reconciliation. A powerful ending.
So if you finish Deadwood, or the movie, and you're just craving more of that kind of complex, gritty, intelligent storytelling, this analysis actually suggests a few other series that might scratch that itch.
Yeah, they throw out some great ones. Shows like The Wire, Rome, Breaking Bad, Boardwalk Empire, also The Nick, Dead Man's Gun, and Justified.
And you can see the connections based on what we've been talking about.
Totally. Like The Wire for that deep institutional critique and moral complexity, Rome for the brutal birth of civilizations, Breaking Bad for those deep dives into moral ambiguity and character psychology.
Boardwalk Empire for the crime and power dynamics. The Nick for that look at the dark side of progress. Similar era, too.
Yeah.
And Justified. Well, Timothy Olyphant, again, playing a morally torn lawman.
That's a good call.
So wrapping up what this review really lays out for us, Deadwood isn't just, a great show. It's described as one of the most literary, brutal, and psychologically rich series ever made.
Absolutely. And that dialogue, that profane poetry, there's just nothing else quite like it.
No, every scene, every line feels like it's digging deeper into what it actually means to try and build something, a town, a life, a society from basically nothing. And the immense cost of wielding power, carrying trauma. It's all there.
And the review's final takeaway is pretty potent. It's not a Western. It's a mirror, a sermon, a eulogy, a warning.
Wow. And doing this deep dive, using your source, this really insightful analysis, it gives you, the listener, a kind of shortcut, right, to understanding just how much meaning is packed into Deadwood. Helps you see those core ideas without spending years dissecting it yourself.
And maybe the thought the analysis leaves us with is this. The show is fundamentally about how people, really flawed, often terrible, genuinely filthy people somehow, against all odds, manage to create something that lasts, something that endures.
Right.
And what does that tell us about society, about human nature, our capacity, or maybe our sheer need to build order, no matter how high the cost? It's definitely something that sticks with you long after the credits roll.